In this video, I'm going to look at a program which has React that has two classes, sort of a parent with a parent-child relationship, and then sort of some communication between the parent and child. So the code for this example can be found at the URL seen here. And this is what it basically looks like. So I will have a component which corresponds to sort of a single row here, sort of a display of information, and it will have sort of two different ways of rendering it. So it will be in a normal displaying mode, it would be displayed like this. And these are just divs or span, I guess they're spans, that the user can't do anything with. But if you hit edit, then they become something that can be edited. So, 6, 7, 8. And so there's a mode for when you're editing, and then you can save it and it goes back into regular display mode. And you can also just remove things. Okay, so that's the basic idea. But so again, there will be a React component that will just correspond to a row, and then there will be this more parent, which will be what I'll call the whole roster. So the collection of them will be in a class, and then the individual class, and then there'll be some communication between them. So the actual data in the components will belong more to the parent, but the individual interactions will at least start with the child. Okay, so that's the game we want to play. And this is all just React, just all pure client side. So like if I refresh, we go right back to the very beginning where there's no back end. We're not remembering anything in the long run or anything. It's just pure like what happens in this session, end of story. Okay. So there's HTML, CSS, a JavaScript. Most everything will be in the JavaScript, the CSS. We have the links to the CDNs, an empty div, and a connection to the script, the JavaScript, and its type is Babel. So I'm going to be using Babel. And that was one of my CDNs. The third CDN here was the Babel CDN. So that was the HTML, the CSS, some body color. This fixed and changing are the different, this is the styling. It's also going to be a different type of element on these two ways of viewing it. So right now these are spans, but if I hit edit, they change elements and become inputs, but also the styling changed. And so we see that here in the fixed and the changing. This was the styling when I was editing. And just making my buttons all the same size, what have you. That's the CSS. Now onto the JavaScript. That's the interesting part. Okay. So there's a class, my course, a class, my roster, and then down at the bottom, finding the div on the HTML page and rendering a roster. So we don't put on the page individual courses, we put the roster, and then the roster is going to use the my course class. Okay. So let's look at, and we need, again, communication between the course and the roster. So in the course, given a row, the course is just a row here. The state, the information doesn't really belong to the course. It's passed to the course, but it doesn't sort of it doesn't start there. It's not really part of its state. So the state in terms of the course is just this, how it's rendered. Are we editing or not? So we start off with this editing property false. There are basically three actions to a course. There's remove a course, edit a course, and then if you are in the midst of editing, let's make this now, I don't know, 4 o'clock. And a save. So those are the three actions. Edit, remove, and save. So let's have a look. So these are the methods. The edit course is really just beginning to edit, and maybe it should say start edit course. And all it does is change the editing property to true, and I have an alert just to see what was going on. Save course is when you're coming out of the editing mode. So you've interacted with the users interacted with the page, and now we're going to save that stuff, not permanently, but within the session. Okay, so this method is going to have to communicate with, because the data belongs to the parent, then this method of the child is going to have to communicate with its parent. Okay, well, here's a simple thing. We set the state of the editing to false. So we're going to, when they click this button, we're going to finish editing and set the editing property back to false. So then our render will switch back to the sort of just display mode. I have some alerts just to, again, see what's going on. You see here that I'm using refs. And so the refs are a way to, they're different from the state in that the one thing that a change in the state causes a re-rendering, and that's not the case with a ref. So it's a place to put something, hold some data, but it's distinct from the state. Okay. But I can get information from this component. So I'm in the course, and I'm using this. So this is going to be referred to the object of this class, one of the courses, the row in which I'm, interacting with, and I'm going to go to its refs. And I have a bunch of refs, one for the course number, one for the teacher, one for the date time, and they will have values. So then I will grab those values. So I want to pass the necessary data up to the parent. I'm going to send it up as an object. So I make a my course object, which has course number, teacher, and day time properties with just sort of fake data at first. And then I'm setting each of those properties based on the references from the course component. And then this line 43, this is where we are going to communicate with the parent. So the component here, the child component, the course has these props, and it is through the props that it will communicate this method within the child. It will communicate with a method belonging to the parent, and that's done. So props was sort of this line of communication, and I need to know which course it was. So one of the props will be an index, sort of telling me in my array of courses which course. And then here's my course, which we just made, which has the new data after the user edited it. So we're collecting the data, we're changing the mode back, we're collecting the data, and then we are communicating with the parent. If they remove a course, I communicate with the parent, and all I have to communicate is the index. Which one do I want to remove? And then finally, within the course, I want to know how to render the course. I render the course differently, whether or not I am editing. So if I am editing, this is the sort of the pink one, I am sending back an input of the text type, input of the text type, input of the text type. Here's the ref to sort of say that I have this thing that the user can change, use the identify it with this ref, and it will have a value. So kind of, you know, kind of like the ID so I can identify the sort of, I don't know, sub component, not my React component, but my input element, I guess I should say, and uh, get the value of it. I changed the class. I added changing to the class, so that gave me that pink styling. That was kind of crappy looking, but and then the default value I'm sending in again the properties. When I make this, it's going to have properties, and I'm going to send it course number, teacher, and day time to sort of to get a start. But by specifying it as default value, React is going to let me sort of change it without complaining. So rather than value, it's default value. And then here's the save button. So when I'm in the editing mode, the button, I have 3 text inputs and a button. Down here is when I am editing, sorry, when I'm not editing, then I have spans and the class name is fixed. So that changes the styling. And between the open span and the closed span, I have the props for the course number, teacher, and day time. And then I have my 2 buttons, and these are calling the methods of this object, this class, the course. And there's the end of course. So the course was again a row, and the row has sort of two rendering looks, when I'm editing and then when I'm not. Okay, so now I'm going to next move on to the parent class, the roster, which is going to be a collection of classes. So this is where the data lives. And so I have a state, and the state is an array of courses. So this is a roster, just a bunch of courses that have all the data, the course number, the teacher, the day time. So that is the constructor and the state of the constructor. Okay. Then I have methods that are not directly called by the events don't belong to the roster. The events belong to the child, to the course. But those, at least 2 of those methods, call methods of the parent, and here they are. So the remove course of the child calls this roster remove course function of the parent, and I need to know the argument is the index. I need to know which one to remove. I make a copy of the courses of my state. This is my array of courses, and I make a copy of it. I'm going to edit that copy by sort of splicing out one element of the course that they wanted removed, and then making that copy back to the courses property by setting my state again. This one is the editing of a course. So there are now 2 arguments, the index I, which course am I editing, and the new info that I sent up in that object. So I sent up an object with all the information, and that object was sent up by the child. Just some console logging. I'm making a copy of the course array, and I'm editing a course. So I'm editing the ith course, and I'm setting its information to new info, and then I am using the copy of courses to reestablish the courses. Okay. And now I'm ready to render, and I am looping over. It looks like I don't do much of anything, but it's just sort of this each course is a method that gets called. So I do a lot, but it's sort of slightly hidden. So when I render, I have a div, and then I am looping, mapping over my courses array, and I am handling each iteration with a method called each course. And I was, at least in one version of this program somewhere in its history, I was having issues with the word this. And was it referring to a function? Was it referring to the method? Was it referring to the class? Was it referring to the function that was doing something like handling the iteration? And this calling the function sort of helped deal with that. So that's why it's here. I could probably, if I were a little smarter, get rid of that and sort of deal with it right away. But here's handling the iteration. I have, I'm going iterating through courses. So, and that one of the arguments is the information of the course, the element of the array, which is item, and then just a counter I. And I am returning a my course. So I'm making the roster is basically makes an array of course components. There are multiples, so React always wants a key when you have multiples. A course has to have an index so that we know when the child interacts with the parent, we know which one through, and that's easily done through its index. There is properties of the course number and the teacher and the day time all being set from the item's data. And then here is this property that connects the functions, the methods of the child and the parent. So there's a property, the course has a property, remove property, and it is connecting us to the parent's method of roster remove course function. And same thing, there's a property called edit property, and that is connecting us to the roster edit course function, again, a method of the parent. So it is through the property of the child that the method of the child can communicate with the corresponding method of the parent. And then here we are at the bottom of my roster, and we have the root to put it on the page. So that's what I wanted to show you, sort of a parent-child sort of class relationship, of parent making children, and then a way for them to communicate. That's what I wanted to show you. Thanks for your attention.